Greetings! I'm Richard, this is Grass Cat Tutorials, and we're back taking a look at our simple tutorial on RPG Maker MZ. So from the first tutorial, you should have 3 maps created. You should have an overworld map that has a tower and a spot for an inn. You should have an interior map of the inn with a little space carved out for the innkeeper and an NPC. And then you should have the tower, which should just have a simple little maze-like path where you can go from the start, wander around, and get to where we're going to put a treasure chest. What we need to do this time around is we need to get some events in here to link everything up. Events are like the heart of an RPG Maker game. Without using events, you pretty much can't do anything in this engine. You could create a single map where you endlessly kill enemies until you either die or you grow bored. That's it. For anything else, resting, shopkeepers, inns, NPCs, conversations, etc., all of that is handled through the event system. Now we're only going to lightly touch on the event system in this sequence because there is, quite honestly, a lot to cover. Alright. Now, thankfully, since there are some events that are very common to do, RPG Maker has given us some default events that we can use just right out of the box. We don't have to do anything pretty much to configure them. To get into event mode, you have to click on this button right here, a little eye that's sitting on the world map. Once you do that, the map icons disappear, and instead you've got just a list here of where all our events are going to be displayed. And you've got, a grid showing you where you can put events. You can put one event on one grid spot. You can technically have an event on every single spot, but that's generally not recommended. All right, what we need is events to transfer us from this map to the inn and tower. So what I'm going to do is on this square where the base of the tower is, I am going to right-click, and then I'm going to select Quick Event Creation. Now this gives us the option to quickly create 5 very common event types. The event type that we want is transfer. It's just going to straight up transfer us from one map to another. So I'm going to select transfer, and then this window will pop up asking us, well, where do you want to transfer to? It is completely acceptable, by the way, for a transfer to transfer you within the same map. It does not have to be to a different map. But in this case, we do want a different map, so I'm going to click there to change my location. I'm going to change to the tower, and then I'm going to click on this little entranceway that I left for myself when I designed the map. Once that is done, I'm going to click OK. And then I'm going to click OK. And there we go. Event created. We can see it now pops up in my list over here. I'm going to do the same thing for my inn. I'm going to right-click. I did left-click initially there, but that's not mandatory. I'm going to right-click. I'm going to go to Quick Event Creation. I'm going to go to Transfer. I'm going to change my location. I'm going to change the location to inn. And then again, I'm going to select this square at the little entryway that I carved out for myself. I'm going to click OK. I'm going to click OK. And there we go. We're done. I now have transfer events set up from this map to the other 2. Now, something you need to keep in mind when you are working with any piece of computer software is this particular mantra. Computers are really, really dumb. They will do exactly what you tell them to do, no more, no less. We have at this point told RPG Maker that we want to transfer from this map to either the inn or the tower. But we have not told it the inverse. We have not told the game that we want to go from the inn to the overworld or the tower to the overworld. Therefore, those connections do not exist yet. You have to be very explicit when dealing with computers. So I'm going to, in my map tree here, click on the tower to switch over to the tower map. Notice there's no events listed now. I'm going to click on this spot here. Now we're going to make our exit and our entry point the same spot. This is fine. When you transfer into a map, that square that you transfer onto is not going to have its event ran when you transfer onto it. It will not trigger an on-touch event. So we won't get caught in an endless loop by making the player teleport into this square and having this square be the one that teleports them out. So I'm going to right click, quick event creation, transfer, change my location, change it to the overworld, click on the tower entry point, click OK, done. Moving on to the inn, same thing. Right click, quick event creation, transfer, overworld, in location, OK, we're done. We now have the ability to walk between all of the maps. Let's do a quick test. So I am going to save. And again, warning, if you have my volume turned up, when you hit play for testing this, you are going to hear the theme music playing, potentially very loudly. I don't know what it is about RPG Maker and its sounds. I have mine disabled, so you will not get the audio from my end. Hurry up and wait a moment. There we go. New game. And I should be able to walk onto this spot. Yep, and I transfer into the tower. Now notice how it says tower in the upper left-hand corner, but it does not say overworld when I go out into the overworld. And likewise, when I walk onto the inn, it's going to say inn up there when I first come into it, and it's going to disappear. That, if you'll recall, when we created these maps, is the display name. Notice that both the inn and the tower have a display name, whereas the overworld map, which I haven't bothered to rename yet, does not have a display name, so nothing is displayed. That is what that property does. Okay, so now we have the ability to transfer between all of our maps. We need to put our goal in, and we also need to put in a reason as to why we're going to go do this. You, generally speaking, in an RPG are going to want to have some form of an NPC forming the impetus, or maybe just giving a hint as to what the player is going to do next. So let's go into our inn, and let's set up two different NPCs. The first NPC we're going to set up is a custom one. He is going to be our quest giver. Now there is no, under quick event creation, quest giver option. That's too unique, too specific to any one given scenario, so it makes sense they don't give us a quick creation option for that. So instead, we are going to right click and we are going to select new, and we are finally going to take a look at the event editor. Now, there's a whole lot of a heckin' lot of boxes here. We're not gonna go over all of them. I'm going to very briefly go over all of the various parts of the interface, but then we're gonna keep things very focused and very simple. The name of the event is what shows up here. It is generally a good idea to name your events sensibly. You do not want a massive list of events called EV001, EV002, EV003, so on and so forth. It's very easy to have 5+ events on even a simple map, and if it's a complex map, you might have 20 or more events on it, and yeah, you need them sensibly named. So I'm going to give this the name of Quest Giver. This name is invisible to the player. Next up, we have the ability to manipulate our pages, which you can see here by this little 1 and this tab here, as I am currently on page 1 of events. You can have a maximum, and don't do this by the way, you can have a maximum, by default, of 20 event pages on any one given event. Honestly, this is more than enough. If you think that you need more than 20 event pages on any one given event, you really need to rethink how you're trying to structure things. Because only one of these is ever only going to be able to run at a time. How the system works is it's going to go to the highest numbered page, and then it's going to come over here to this conditions block. And it's going to check to see if the conditions for this page are true. And if it is, it stops right there, and that is the only page that will be ran. And there are ways of doing if-else, branching logic inside these contents here that makes it that you don't really, even for complex NPCs, you do not need to use 20 different states for an NPC. Again, you can just sort of think of like each of these pages as a complete unique state for that event to be existing in. We'll deal a lot more with this later, just to be aware that 20 is your max, and you really don't need more than that. And I've already gone over the conditions. It just basically says if these conditions are true, then the page will run. If there are no conditions, then the page will always run. That means it is completely pointless to have 2 pages like this, because page 2 is always going to be true because there's no conditions, and therefore page 1 will never run. Again, we only want 1 page for this, so if you did click on the new page or copy page or any of these buttons up here, make sure you click on the delete event page button until you're down to 1 page. Image is how the event is going to appear on the map to the player. In this particular case, since I want a quest giver NPC, I'm going to double click on this so then I can select an image. Your options here are determined by what you have imported in via the Resource Manager and the Database Manager tools. We're not going to fool with that for this tutorial, so we're just stuck with the defaults, and honestly it gives us quite a bit of defaults. We've got the 3 actor classes. You generally want to avoid the damage classes. These are for like battles, unless you want to have a NPC that's like lying on the ground wounded or something. You can do evil, monsters, you've got a collection of critters, you can, gates, doors, switches, big monsters, etc., etc. You got a lot of options here. For this particular example, I'm going to choose Actor 2, and I am going to choose this particular image right here facing up, because that's where, on the south side of the table, so the NPC should be looking up. Now it's important to note, and we'll see this in action when we go to do the treasure chest in the tower, that for character sheets like this, they all have this specific format of down, left, right, and up in terms of the direction that the sprite is facing. So I'll hit OK, and now I can see my image there. Autonomous movement. This is where you determine whether or not the event moves around or stays in place. We're not going to get into moving events this time around. Just know that this is where we would change our options if we wanted, say, a NPC cat to be wandering around the scene. Your options here determine the animation types. Do we want to animate while the event is moving? Do we want to animate while the event is staying still, so they sort of like walk in place, or do we want to not do any of that? I'm going to uncheck walking, even though it's kind of a moot point. It actually has no relevance because this event is not going to move. Priority. What draw level basically is this event at? Is it below the character, so the character can walk on top of it, which is something you might want to use for, say, a button? Or is it the same level as the character, like what we would want to use for an NPC? And then finally, trigger. How are we going to touch this event off? Does the player actively have to press a button to activate the event, or is it going to run on touch? if we take a look at the transfer, which we will in a moment, we'll see that its priority is below and the trigger is touch. All right, so that's a quick overview of everything there. Now let's get to the contents. What is this event going to do once it actually runs? Keep in mind there is a difference between a page being active and the event running. These conditions being true, it means that this page is active, but it does not mean that the contents are automatically executing. That's going to be based on how it is triggered. I want this event, this NPC, to say something. So I'm going to come here to this first line, this little diamond here. I'm going to double click on it. And then you've got all of the event commands. I strongly advise that you take some time and just go through all 3 pages of this and one at a time click on it and see what your options are. Now just see what is available for you. You don't even really have to understand it. Just go through and click and see what your options are. So that way when you're thinking in the future of, I want to do X, I vaguely remember seeing an event that might work for that. So it is advised that you just go through and look at all of these. Put on some good second monitor content and just chill out for 20 minutes. Not right now though. We don't need to do that now. What we do need to do is we need to be on page 1, the first page of the event commands, and messages, and more specifically show text. I'm going to select show text, and it's going to bring up this window here. Now if you don't assign a face, it's just going to be text without any kind of icon. And you'll notice if you mouse over the text area and then don't move your mouse for a moment, you'll get this little hopeful pop-up here showing all of the various formatting options that you have available to you. We're not going to use any of these this time, but it's good to know that it's there. What I want to do is I want to set the face. Now, with the included assets, and with pretty much, as far as I'm aware, all of the DLCs that you can officially purchase through the Steam page, they're all formatted in the way that if you chose a sprite icon from Act or 2, there's going to be a corresponding face. And it's going to match up to the order in which they were displayed in the sprite icons. So I chose the lower right group of sprites, and that's designed to go with this particular face right here. You don't have to do that. There's obviously, I could instead choose actually this is who you're talking to, despite the fact that this looks nothing like the sprite. But you get the point. You're not required to do it, but I do want to go ahead and keep it sensible. Mostly. We are on a quest to open a box, so, And then we can put in text. So, here there is a box in the tower. I think you should go and open it. Well, I'm kind of curious as to what this line is, and it seems like, I guess it'll just automatically format things and, auto wrap the text around. So, there's a preview button. Yeah, no, it doesn't do any of those things. Yeah, the point of this line right here is to show you the danger zone, there we go, I can't talk, of where you're going to have the words run off the edge of the window. You should never allow text to go past that line. There we go. Now it works just fine. And of course we can put in a name, if we so desire, which I do. Now, the name's not going to display in the preview, unfortunately, but it does display once we actually go into testing this and playing the game. So now, I'm going to hit OK, and now we can see the event here. Something that is not immediately obvious is how to edit an existing event. If I double-click on this, it's going to bring up the event command list again, and if I select an option, I'm just going to leave that blank, it's going to insert that command above the event that I double-clicked on. If I want to edit an event, I have to right-click and select Edit, or use the keyboard shortcut space. course, if I want to get rid of an event, I can right-click and delete, or just hit the delete key. Either way works just fine. And there we go. I have a basic NPC that's going to prompt the player to go into the tower to open a box. We have our inciting incident. Now, I would have my JRPG license revoked if I did not put an inn into this project, even though we really do not need one. So let's put in an inn. Up here, where I carved out my space for my innkeeper. I'm going to right-click, and I'm going to go to Quick Event Creation, and I'm going to select Inn. It's going to give me a default image of an innkeeper. Looks fine to me. How much is a nightly stay going to cost? 10 gold? Sure, whatever. Sounds fine. Click OK. There we go. We have an innkeeper now. Now, if we double-click on the innkeeper, you can see there's a lot more that goes into this. Honestly, nothing's really all that complicated. If you think about it step by step, all of this makes a lot of sense. Ask the player, do they want to stay for the night? A display of the choice. If they said yes, do we have enough gold? If we had enough gold, then we need to take away the gold and fade out the screen and play a sound effect. We need to wait and yada 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 yada. It makes sense. The one thing that might not make sense immediately upon looking at it is this is a trigger, right? In order to trigger an event, we have to be right next to the event in order to trigger it. We can't trigger an event through a wall, right? And yet, if we walk up to this area here and we activate either from this tile or this tile, we'll be able to activate the event. What's going on? Well, when we dig deeper into tile sets in the database in future videos, we'll see that you have the ability to designate certain tiles as counters for this very reason. And if something has been designated a counter, like these have been designated, then if there is a trigger event on the other side of a counter, just one counter's length, can't be two, it has to be one counter's length, then the event will trigger. So we'll be able to trigger our shopkeeper from behind the counter. So that sets up our inn. Well, let's go ahead and set up our tower. So we're going to come over here to the tower, and we want a treasure here. So in this corner down here, I'm going to right-click, and I'm going to use a quick event creation, and I'm going to create a treasure. Let's just give the players 50 gold. Because it honestly doesn't matter, right? Because once we open this box, that's it. Game over. And let's take a quick look at the treasure, because we are going to have to come back and modify this in a moment. So we do kind of need to understand what's going on with the treasure. It's doing a couple of things that might not really be clear at first glance. First of all, we have multiple pages. If we look at page 2, we see that page 2 is active if the condition self-switch A is on. Anytime you refer to a switch, those are true-false values, and variables contain numbers. You can kind of think of if the event system is the heart of an RPG Maker game, then the switch and variables are the left and right halves of the game's lungs. It's like you need to use these. If you don't have switches and variables, yeah, the event system will be able to keep the body alive for a short bit, but ain't gonna last long, and this metaphor is getting really tortured moving on. But a self-switch is specific to the object that it is on. This event, this treasure box, is the only thing that can see this self-switch A. Obviously, when the game first starts, switch A is off. All switches start off, all variables start 0. So then page 1 will be the active page, and you can see that it's a closed treasure chest. So what's going on here with this movement thing? First of all, we're turning fixed direction off. We're turning left, waiting 3 frames, and turning right. What? Well, remember I said about characters. You have a very specific format with the characters. Well, the treasure chest system kind of hijacks that animation system. Looking down is the default. Looking left has it open as the first frame of opening. Looking right is the second frame of opening. And then looking down is the final frame of opening and is the image that page 2 uses. So we get this illusion of the chest opening by making the chest turn left, air quotes, waiting a moment, turning right, air quotes, waiting a moment, and then as soon as switch A is turned on and this event finishes processing, which will be milliseconds to our perception, it finishes off with the final frame of the animation, and that's where it stays. We are going to have to come back and modify this, but let's do a quick test. Now, before we do our test, currently we're starting in the overworld. We don't want to start in the overworld, we want to start in the inn. Maybe we just spent the night and we're waking up, and so we want to have the character start inside our little room here. It doesn't really matter where in the inn you start, but let's change our starting point to the inn. So I'm going to select this spot here. I'm going to right click, and then one of our options here is set starting position. Notice we do have the ability to set starting positions for boats, ships, and airships. We'll deal with those much later, not in this tutorial sequence. For the moment, we want to set the starting position for the player, which will immediately cause the player icon to appear there. All right, let's give this a whirl. Let's save. Hit the run button. Hit new game, and hey, we're starting off in the inn. Excellent. So we can come over here, we can talk to the innkeeper. Nope, don't have enough money because I start off with 0 gold. That's fine. Can talk to the quest giver. I'm told that there's a box in a tower and they think I should go and open it and see that now it is giving me the quest giver name. I can leave the inn, go to the tower, hold down shift so I run. Open up the chest, 50 gold is found, and now when I try to activate it, nothing happens. And nothing happens. We've got a problem, right? It's like, okay, the chest opened, and the chest does stay open. If I leave and come back to the tower, it's still an open chest. And if I come back here to my inn, there's no acknowledgement that I've opened the chest. And that's very important to player engagement, that when the player does something major, that the game, at least in some fashion, acknowledges that the player has done a thing. We should acknowledge that the player has opened the box. We should also probably throw at least something resembling a challenge at the player, stopping them from just walking in and grabbing the item out of the box. So that is what we're going to take a look at the next tutorial. Setting up basic random encounters is fairly simple, so we'll do that in the next video, and we'll also set up and do some very minor modifications to the treasure chest and our NPC here, so that way we get acknowledgement that the box was opened and get a game over screen, or more appropriately, a you win screen. Thank you very much for joining me on this tutorial. If you learned something or found it entertaining, a thumbs up would be appreciated. And if you felt like I wasted your time, the thumbs down button is right next to it. Until next time.